What's up, everybody? I am excited to be in conversation with my brother today, Casey Phillips with the Walls Project. We're going to talk a little bit about our relationship and the work here in Baton Rouge, but also digital equity. How are you today, my brother?
Man, I couldn't be better. I said it's been a long road that we've known each other.
We have. You have been a lot of things in your journey in life, but we met through your roles in nonprofit work here in Baton Rouge. Talk to me about how you evolved into what is the Walls.
Yeah, so when we first met in 2012, if memory serves correct, I had worked in the entertainment industry. Definitely a private sector kind of human, and moved back from Los Angeles to my hometown. And, I got two eyes in my head and two ears, right? And, I just spent some time trying to kind of get reacclimated, and in all the parts of the city that I grew up in, right, looked significantly different 2 decades later. Which, when you say 20 years, I mean, it sounds like a long time, but it's not really, right? For when you talk about North Baton Rouge, which, people use different definitions of that, I'm just going to use it as the broad sense, where Redemptorist was, right? And the gym at Estruma, where I grew up, and I think the first McDonald's playground that I ever played in, as a kid was on Plank Road, right? And that's where I'd walk from my grandma's house to Krispy Kreme and McDonald's. And when I moved back in the, 2011, 2012, I mean, everything felt very different. And when I say that it felt, it was clear that schools had been closed, businesses has been closed, just the state of repair, right? The care of the neighborhoods, the infrastructure was significantly lacking. And after moving to the West Coast and making moves around the country quite a bit, I felt like I had a little bit more of an understanding of why that might be the case, but I wanted to understand more, right? So I believe that you and I's first session outside that coffee shop downtown, I believe both of us were asking more questions than we were actually.
I don't know if we got the answers yet.
Yeah, no, we're still trying, but we were just asking very basic questions, right? And I was like, do you know why that this is this? And you were asking, well, has it always been this way? And, and I mean, we were just like kind of just in general, we were confused as to how the city had kind of gotten to where it was, but we weren't confused. Like, we knew what the score was, and the problem was that nobody really wanted to ask those questions, and nobody wanted to talk about it in the light of day as opposed to their living rooms. And I feel like what you were doing with the Rouge Collective, right, and what we were doing with the Walls, we were intensifying the dialogue past people's comfort level, and all with the intention of getting to the truth. And once we knew what the truth was, well, that's when you can get down to business. Even if you don't agree on the approach, if everybody can agree on what the truth is, we can move forward. And I agree with you. Unfortunately, in 2025, in some ways, we're still asking the same questions, and people don't seem to necessarily want to say the truth all the time.
I have, through journeying in this life and this work, asked more questions than I've ever gotten answers for, right? But I don't struggle with it as much as I used to, because I understand that I can't fix everything, and it's not my job to. But if I can make certain things better along the way, then, we leave a better condition for our children than the one that we picked up. And the reality is, when we look back at our childhood, for me, North Baton Rouge, and I think that this is where the perplexity comes in for some folks, that you can have a black man and a white man that grew up in the same community that can look back at the same neighborhood and say, this was better 20 years ago, or this was in a more vibrant space than it is today. I remember, so I grew up off Mickens Road, that there were 2 grocery stores within a mile of my house. I could go to Silvio's grocery store, or I could go to the Piggly Wiggly. Silvio's closed first, then the Piggly Wiggly closed. We stopped shopping at the Piggly Wiggly before the Piggly Wiggly closed because the meat smelled a little funnier when you walked in the door. It smelled like spoiled meat and bleach all the time, so we stopped going there because the quality of what existed in the community wasn't even the same, right? That to me has always been visible. But when we don't discuss it, we don't fix it. And I think that a lot of times people saw things that I initially said probably with a little more flavor than I would today. But did I lie? Was the condition of the community bad? Were we having glossy, rosy conversations like we were doing something transformational when we were seeing transformation, but not for the good? And that's what I appreciated about the work that Walls was doing, that you guys weren't afraid to get your hands dirty. You weren't afraid to come into the community and activate with people who are actually in the community doing the work. You guys didn't try to act like you had all the answers, and you were good partners for the work. And so I have appreciated that through the years. For me, especially growing up in Baton Rouge, where race is always such a big underlying issue. When people see our relationship, I'm not sure if people have understood it always, because it's like, Gary has a white guy that likes him? Yeah. More than you know.
Loves him.
Yeah.
And respects.
I love you back.
Vice versa. You know what I mean? Like, I remember when we were first starting, and, you know, people sometimes, I think, depending on what circles we're talking about, and when we weren't in the rooms, right, people would maybe, like, I'm going to use the non-4-letter words, right? They would call us troublemakers, right? And I always say, you know, your real allies when people and how they speak on you when you're not around, right?
Right.
And I would just shut that down, right? I'm like, he's not a troublemaker. All he's doing is asking questions, and he's giving you his perspective. But what's really the reason why you think he's a troublemaker is he's making you uncomfortable. And that's the problem, is that you are labeling us as troublemakers, but when in all actuality, we're actually on the same side as you. We're not afraid to say the things that need to be said and worrying about if it's good for business or not.
Should we be comfortable in environments that are uncomfortable for our neighbors, right? If I'm a good neighbor, right? If I'm a good neighbor and my neighbor's house is struggling for long periods of time, and I'm a good neighbor, we have a relationship, I'm gonna check on you. I'm gonna ask, I give you an example. I've lived in the same neighborhood. My parents live across the street from me. Well, I live across the street from my parents. It was their neighborhood first. But I live across the street from my parents, and I have watched their next door neighbor and them for years. And as they're both getting old, my dad's 82, I would imagine that the neighbor is closer to his 70s. And when they have conversations, if one of them has not come to check their mail in too long, if one of them has not came out to cut the grass, the other one is eventually going to come knock on the door and say, hey, you okay? I don't think that anybody from South Baton Rouge in a tangible way, politically, in the structures that control the power of this city, was saying, hey, are you okay? Is North Baton Rouge okay? We've done all of this work to invest in this part of town. We've done all of these things to put resources into this part of town, that there's now a lopsided issue. And the minute that people started calling that out and saying that, I think that made a lot of people uncomfortable with reality. But the reality is these people are uncomfortable. And why are you okay with that? Why are you okay with healthcare centers closing on the other side of town to say that we end up with a healthcare district on this side of town that I can't even get to? Right? Now,
well, you can get to it an hour and 45-minute bus ride. Hopefully it's nothing that's important, right? And that's pressing. I mean, things are going well in certain parts of the city, and I watch people pull out their 225 Rouge pom-poms and talk about, celebrate how everything is. But my simple fact is, if we're going to sleep every night with 1 in 4 children are starving at night, how are you okay with that? That's your neighbor.
And then you wonder how the crime rate goes where it is. I think what frustrates me often with the city is we talk about the problems so frequently, right? so audaciously bold too, right? But when we get to talking about what it takes to solve the problems, the real programming that is necessary, the work that Walls has been doing for years, that other organizations have been doing for years, that needs more funding, right? That you can literally see a correlation in these young people ending up in a different trajectory, but we don't invest at the level necessary in order to see the turn that we want to see in our community. And I think that, to me, is the give that's got to happen at some point. Now, I do think that some of that give is on us, right, as community. That community has to be willing to confront that if a leader is not giving us what we desire, then maybe we need to look at a different type of leader, right?
Sure.
We've done that. We got a different mayor in this community now.
Yep.
That's making decisions in a different direction. People will have to make a decision about that later. But when are we going to be very strategic in the conversation of it's going to rain? When are we going to be very strategic in the conversation about what we want to see in community from these leaders? And don't waver until we get it.
Well, yes, and our political leaders are one part of it. I always like to kind of back up and take the rocks out by hand, right, and look at the glass house and look at the mirror part. I appreciate what you said about the Walls. As these 13 years have gone through, and we do work in other cities, we had the benefit of learning from all of our mistakes, and we made plenty. And one of the things that I think that we would have done differently, right? You're right. It's like, when we do this work, I was, people would see me walking down Winburn or North 38th or Scenic or Plank, and I have my paint jeans on, my long hair down, and just being like, what are you up to and stuff? And we would tell people, and we're working with young people with the Future's Fund, and we're, growing food, and we're doing all these things with the community, right? But if I had it all to do again, and I think that this is one of the major points that we're missing in general, not just in nonprofit. If I had it all to do again, I would have found every single group in Scotlandville, in Dixie, in Zion City, in Eden Park, right? And I would have fundraised for them at the exact same time I was fundraising for us. And I would have said, what are you already doing? And how can we make what you're doing that's good, great, and then eventually world class? And if you're doing something that ain't working, just like how you unelect people, hey, you need to stop doing that, because in all honesty, it's not working. We're not saying we're going to be the ones to do it. We need to find someone else who is, and grow that community power from within from day one. And I hope that if anybody's watching this and they are looking to start a movement, right, of some kind, or be part of a movement first. But if you want to start your movement, start it by empowering the people who are literally at ground zero for that movement. It's not enough just to work with people anymore. You actually, if you're working in impoverished neighborhoods, I hate to be this simplistic about it, but if people are living in poverty and you want to change that condition, then bring a ton of money into it. And they're like, well, money doesn't fix everything. That sounds like bullshit that people who have a lot of money that don't want to give up their money.
That's right.
If you want people to not be poor, then you don't just give the opportunity for a job. You got to start 20 years down the road with their schools, with their roads, with their access to food, equal pay. I will say it again, equal pay is one of the biggest things that is holding our state back. Women are getting paid a fraction of what men are getting paid for doing exactly the same damn job, but they got to still pay the same bills, right? And so if I would have really understood the policy, the bad policy, and the underpins of poverty, then we would have started the work in North Baton Rouge. And by now, after a decade, Walls would have been literally not needing to be in North Baton Rouge anymore, except when we're invited to work on a project. And that's something that you gotta live and learn as you go through it. It certainly wasn't out of neglect. It just, I didn't have a crystal ball in my third eye.
There's a lot of things that I think we are judged by, that we're all navigating, trying to figure out, how do we do something good? How do we do something impactful? building a plane and flying at the same time. But the reality is most folks never hear a leader come back and say what you just said, though, right? And so I think that is important, that folks, one, see the evolution of understanding. That if I understood today if I understood then what I understand today, the impact would be different. Not that the impact wasn't there, but the impact would be different. And I think that one of the tasks that we have with the time that we have left is to try to be as transformational as possible. And that requires us to look at how is the condition being changed to these people long term, right? If I am in a condition today that is not being addressed and you're talking about tomorrow, there is no long-term change for me because I can't even get to tomorrow.
Yes. I mean, we have all these philosophical, waxing poetic sessions in boardrooms and sometimes at the Metro Council meetings, which quite frankly, when you and I first started in this work, we were never welcomed into that third floor chamber. But luckily, because our taxpaying dollars paid it, they couldn't remove us except when they decided to do so with the police, right? And we have been in those Metro Council meetings where I believe I've actually seen you let out a few times and peacefully walked out after saying your piece. Like you said, what we were saying,
sometimes not so peacefully.
Not so peacefully. I don't want to gloss over it, but I find that's the thing, right? It's like when you go into the space with truth and the space isn't ready for the truth, you have to accept the consequences of that. And quite frankly, I think that you, in particular, out of the two of us, were absolute in your resolve from day one on that. I think I came to it because it became very clear to me that it's like you're either going to do this or you're not. And if you do, you have to be willing to live with the consequences of it. And you look at the city council meetings now versus 13 years ago. I'm not saying it's always civil because I'm not saying that it always needs to be civil. But there's a lot more truth at the microphone.
We have a lot better counsel, in my opinion. We have people who are willing to not just speak truth, but hear truth. I think that we previously had leaders who didn't do well with opposition. I think that some of that talking, though, has conditioned folks to be able to accept truth as well, but something you said, I don't think I always had a resolve in doing it. I just did it anyway. I think that because sometimes people think that we are more courageous than we are. I may have been more foolish than courageous some days, but I still believed that I was doing what was right, and I think that the one thing that I can look back sometimes and say, I could have said something better. I maybe would have chosen better words. But I cannot look back and say that I was not standing in principle, that I wasn't trying to shine light on something that I felt was illuminating a place of darkness in our community that we didn't want to deal with, whether that be the lack of economic opportunity in contracts, where we were doing 2% of city parish contracts with black folks, even though black folks made up 56% of the city, whether it was Lamar Johnson dying in Parish prison, whether it was Alton Sterling, whether it was any of the other young people who had an encounter with the police in this city during that time period that were unjustly dealt with by their government, that they were paying taxes to the government. And if we look today, 10 years later, we are better in some of these areas because we were willing to have hard conversations, because we were willing to confront something, and because a group of leaders, even if you heard things you didn't like, even if there were people in the room you didn't like, that you look for what is true here and what can we fix. And that kind of leads me to the digital equity plan, right? Which is why we in this whole conversation to begin with, that Baton Rouge has a digital equity gap that has existed for some time. Now there is a plan to address that, but let's talk about how we got to a digital equity plan for the city and the parish of East Baton Rouge Parish, and what that looks like for the parish?
Yeah. So to me, the digital divide and digital equity, it feels very benign, right? Unless you're living in it. But when you talk about one for young people going to bed at night, I mean, people are like, for the most part, you're going to be up in arms about that. If there are a lot of our schools are getting DNF ratings, people will rally around that, and they understand like why that's important to improve it. When you talk about the digital divide, people are just like, and you can almost feel their heads like float towards Instagram and thinking about their next vacation picture or their food picture, right? It's just like, it doesn't like really click. So as I look into the camera and try to get people's attention the way that we used to in 2012, this is probably one of the biggest issues actually in the city that no one is talking about enough. There are people who have been advocating for years on this, don't get me wrong. And especially if you live in Scotlandville, if you live on 72nd and you've tried to log in from COVID on, and you've tried to like join a Zoom call that you go in and out of trying to make your point, or if a young person in your household has been trying to do virtual learning and you can't get a stable connection, you fall behind in school, you already know about the digital divide, but you may not even have had the language around it. But let's just be very clear with the absolute coming of AI and the sentient being that it might even become, right? And the speed of technology that we're about to, not that we've been in, that we're about to encounter, this digital divide is already a massive issue, and it is going to become a gulf. A Gulf of Mexico, if you will, if we're still allowed to say that out loud. And it said, and people are going to be left marooned with absolutely no hope of getting back to the other side. The information industry, right? The information world is only accessed through the digital lens. And the Walls Project has had a coding program for over a decade. You were actually the first person to ever write about the Futures Fund coding program that we were doing in very humble beginnings at Southern Lab and at Southern University on Saturdays, that grew to a movement of thousands of youth being very not only technologically savvy, but also with entrepreneurship in creative industry training. That in and of itself wasn't meant to catch anybody up. It was meant to catch all of the students in North Baton Rouge up and then leapfrog in front of even the private school kids that, maybe they had a computer lab, but they weren't learning the kind of like the intense coding that's the infrastructure and the scaffolding of AI in Python that we were teaching in 2014. So, and I'm going to get to my point around the digital divide, but I always feel that with an abstract concept, you have to kind of bring it to a story on a person, right? And there's a young man, and I'll leave his last name out, but his first name is Mordecai, right? Mordecai entered into the Futures Fund. We made an exception for him because at age 11, he had a propensity towards technology, and he had parents that were like some of the best parents I've ever met, even compared to like, makes me want to be a better parent, right? And they would show up, they would bring him, and that young man, that young human just flew through our program, right? In our training program, flew to the front of the class and work study. He was already brilliant in his own way, but we gave him a world that he could only kind of have a fuzzy understanding of, and we made it very tangible for him and also honed his personal skills, his pitching skills, entrepreneurship. So fast forward to 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago, I was in Houston, Texas for a conference. And I'm in there on the second day, and it occurred to me, I'm like, that's where Mordecai is going to college. And, we stay in contact, but we don't talk every day. So I texted him, and that young human, 21 years old, said, sure, I'll be there at 7:30 in the morning and show up at the hotel and have breakfast. That young man last weekend walked across Rice's stage with a degree in computer science and already had his job at Google in New York like 6 months ago.
Wow.
And so that access that brilliant young human got to have, he's already, I mean, we'll all be working for him in the next 20 years, but that's just one human. Think about hundreds and thousands of Mordecais, right? Who don't have access not only to fast and reliable internet, but they don't have access to the digital literacy skills. They don't have access to the devices, right? These individuals that are being cut out of that opportunity, you don't necessarily have to agree that everyone should have equal opportunity. We can agree to disagree on that. But if you just from a capitalist America's capitalist, a capitalist standpoint, we are missing out on hundreds and thousands of entrepreneurs and skilled workers and innovators that are just being left on the other side of the gulf of this digital divide on something that we could literally solve with policy and resources being directed. It's not even like we don't know how to do it. There's no headlines in running broadband. There's no headlines in making sure that everybody has access to digital literacy classes and access to laptops. But these are fundamental tools as much as being able to have a skillet in the kitchen, being able to cook.
I agree fully, and I think that that's why it's a rare thing for us here, but it's a beautiful thing that we are at the front of this conversation in the state, that we were one of the first parishes to finish the digital equity plan, submit that. Am I right about that?
Amen.
And so now we're in a position, Mayor Broom's administration helped kick off getting this plan in motion. Now Mayor Edwards' team is in support of this. The funding is there. And so hopefully to be able to see these things continue to be worked out. But for Baton Rouge to have a plan in place that is going to answer these things is a positive for us as a community.
Yeah, let's celebrate being number one, right? Louisiana was number one out the gates with the broadband initiative that Governor Edwards started, and quite frankly, Governor Landry continued, right? Like without question. And we have the opportunity, as long as, you know, the federal government is in fact still here.
So let's pause for the cause. Don't take all the money, okay?
Okay.
Don't take all the money. You ain't got to take all the money. All right.
Yes,
all right.
please,
That's all
please,
I'm gonna say. Because we want the money to come, so I don't want to tick nobody off.
Yeah, there you go. Amen. But no, I mean, like, that's the thing. I mean, this is a bipartisan issue, right? Like it has been from the very beginning. There'll be a little bit of political grandstanding around the edges around any major federal allocation of funding, and that's just to be expected. But I mean, when you're looking at 90 to 95%, whether it's red or blue, understand like how much this unlocks. And we can just look at the recent headlines. Like you think that Meta is dropping these billions of dollars into North Louisiana on a whim? You look at the work that Ruston, all the way from Ruston Monroe, and the universities and the private sector put into setting the conditions for them to come in and invest into broadband, like with the broadband and all the digital assets and infrastructure. It's there, and that's why that investment came. So,
and pause for the cause.
Yeah, sure.
If you don't know fully what we're saying when we say broadband, your internet access. It's your ability to access internet easily in your home, at your office, within the global community. Everybody doesn't have the same access to internet space. Everybody doesn't have the same access to broadband. The more that we expand these lines, the more that we give people access, the more we make it affordable for everybody, the more opportunity that exists for everybody, no matter what zip code you live in.
Yes. And you know, what everyone needs to understand is this plan is going to be on brla.gov, right? It's a iterative document.
And it was produced by people from this community.
1,000%, like in this community, private sector, municipal, private citizens, nonprofits. It is the beginning of the work, right? It's an iterative process document that's going to need to be consistently updated because the digital world is changing so fast.
Say that one more time.
Yeah.
The plan will continue to be updated. So if you wasn't a part of the planning process and you see something that wasn't there, just say something so that it can be included in the future.
Yes, and because the importance of getting the plan done, and at least in version 1 of it, and getting it up there is to position the capital region to be able to access the dollars that are flowing from the federal government through the state into the infrastructure. And let's not use big words. There has been a scan done to find all the dead spots for internet access in the capital region. So there are actual financial incentives for companies like Cox, Rev, and eTel to be able to access funds and to run more fiber and to be able to connect all households as well as institutions like libraries and community centers and what have you. That's phase 1. Because it's kind of like when you're building a house. You got to frame the house, you got to run the plumbing. You don't throw the drywall up first, right? And so the first wave of all that work has been done a lot in the rural parishes, right? That was a major focus, as it should have been. Mm-hmm. But now the focus kind of turned to the urban centers, right? Because it's crazy to think that you could literally go 2 miles down the road in Baton Rouge and you have like the top speed internet and then absolutely at the bottom. And it's simply it's for a lot of reasons that you and I could probably pontificate about, but I'm not worried about that. Let's solve the problem. Let's solve the problem. Let's get the solution on the ground. And then what comes is the next waves of this, right? The second waves, and again, without using big words, just more access to devices, whether they're hardwired computers at desktops, whether it's laptops, your phone, to be able to access that high-speed internet, not just to shop on Amazon during school board meetings. I said, you want to be able to actually think about this, y'all. Like, this is not only causing K through 12 students to fall behind, but everybody wants more workforce, right? Everybody's workforce. Everybody needs training. We want more people to get associate degrees. Well, you can't do that if you can't get online. And also throw on top of it, you don't have good public transportation to be able to get to the place. Having great broadband across the entire capital region is the absolute best way to ensure folks that want to get ahead, go ahead and get into the workforce and bolster our economy.
The last time we were together, you were giving away computers to people in the process of all you had to do was show up, participate in the conversation to qualify. But that's what it's going to take. It's going to take corporations, business entities, giving of their resources to make sure that people have access to these devices. That was a sum of that. But also then the access in the lines being in their community. But those things create jobs, whether you are creating a job by the folks who are laying the line, the folks who are supplying the line, the folks who are working maintenance on the trucks that are out there doing the lines, right? Oh, yeah. I think that we don't realize that every time the feds are sending us a $700 million, $800 million, that those jobs create other jobs that pay other folks in other positions. Like if you're a person, if that guy who's laying that line is working, that brother needs lunch. He's going to come to your restaurant. Oh, yeah. That restaurant owner is going to buy their supplies from somebody's grocery store. That grocery store is going to buy their food from some farmer or some distributor. And all of this is interconnected. And so sometimes I think that we get so far away, we see a big number and we say, how does that impact my life? It impacts your life because this internet line that may not mean nothing to you because you got internet, it's going to help somebody else get an opportunity to get a job. But the money that it takes to feed that is going to feed the rest of this community. And so we want those resources coming into our state. We want to be at the front of the line before people start pulling money out of those coffers, because when it's gone, it's gone. And we want to make sure that we are at the front of getting those resources. And so I'm grateful that One Rouge and Walls has been a part of this work to help us get this digital equity plan. I'm grateful that the previous administration and the current administration are keeping this in the forefront, because Louisiana does not have to be last at everything. And this is proof of that.
1,000%. You can't wait for the house to be on fire to take action all the time, which is kind of our MO, right? And when you were talking about people giving very elaborate descriptions of problems and we're amazing at it, I always like to pause and encourage people to demonstrate that point. It's like everyone in this room included, close your eyes, right? And when you close your eyes, describe to me, you have all these ideas to create solutions for all these problems. Close your eyes, think about it, and describe to me in 20 years from today what our city looks like if we implemented all your big, bold ideas. And it's harder than you think, right? And in order to come up with those ideas and then find other people to work on those, that's the hard work. But that's where we are right now with this. Because if we close our eyes and we actually think about a city that becomes in Louisiana one of at the forefront of the digital revolution, the information economy, then you're talking about Louisiana as the capital region, Louisiana not being 50th in the future of the workforce come 2050. That's why the work, it's not just for our kids. It's not just for our kids' kids. It's for the world, right? And so I'll take it that far, is that the innovation for some of the biggest problems in society, the solutions for those actually lie. They're actually living in Sherwood Forest. They're living in Central. They're living in Baker.
We just need to unlock it.
We got to unlock it and pop that top. And then, there's some other conversations around investment and other things. But the reality is what we all know is that the future is digital. And so whatever we can do to close our eyes and dream forward into the digital economy, that is a step in the right direction, and we can't go alone. We need everybody to do it together so that it actually becomes a powerful movement and not of a few.
Thank you so much, my brother, for helping make that clear to us and for the work that you have been doing consistently, diligently, and with heart. And so this relationship and friendship has existed for over a decade, and I hope to continue to be in this fight with you for decades to come, my brother.
Yeah, man. And I look, first of all, I'm in for it forever with you, but I look forward to the day where it ain't no more fighting.
I know, right? That's right.
And everybody, I said, I feel like we're starting to get to the age in our work, not just in our gray in the beard. I'm saying a little bit of both, but I think that everybody can recognize that a lot of the things that maybe that we said then are very true now, and to maybe give us the benefit of the doubt that what we're saying now will be. And I always say there's a hell of a lot more room in the back of the bandwagon than in the front seat next to Gary and I, because we big dudes. So we welcome everybody to be part of the work. And to be honest, we're looking forward to the day where we get out and toss the keys and let you get in the driver's seat. And we can go for a ride for a while and enjoy a much more prosperous and equitable Baton Rouge.
I agree, my brother.
Yeah, man. That's how it is.
Thank you all for watching and being a part of this conversation. Until next time.